Hi, this is Peter Friedrich, and today we're here speaking with Dr. Ashok Swain of Uppsala University about the issue of Hindu nationalism and its influence in India, and more specifically abroad in politics, such as in the United States of America. Dr. Swain, I want to welcome you
Thank
and
you.
thank you for your time in advance. And you're a professor of peace and conflict research. And you are also known for being vocal about the current situation in India. So, in regards to that, I would like to ask you, Dr. Swain, what is the current situation in India? And from your perspective, is there more peace or more conflict going on there right now?
I think the conflict is not necessarily bad, but the bad conflict is bad. And what we see that in India, there is a more of bad conflicts going on. Bad conflicts means conflict becoming not on the issue of ideas, but it is going into all kind of sectarian issues, becoming more and more violent, creating political disorder. As you see, there was a new statistics came out this week saying that the rise of India is the next to Nigeria, which has seen the maximum rise of political violence and political disorder in the world. And this is happening because I think if you can see, the India has been going through, which we will discuss, a kind of very big transition from a secularism to a Hindu fundamentalism or Hindu chauvinism state for last at least 6 years at a very, very significant level. And I think this is where, because economy was doing well before, and you were expecting that there is India is looking at a population growth, a huge youth population, but India has been going through economic crisis. Even before the COVID came in, there was a huge economic crisis was going on, and the COVID has made it much worse. And we don't know what exactly, but it will be a negative economic growth possibly. The job loss has been absolutely unbelievable. And particularly if you look at it, yesterday came out the ILO report with the Asian Development Bank. Around 4 to 6 million youth have lost their jobs already. So, and forget there is a much larger number when we come back. And these are the salaried people when they are losing their jobs, and particularly young ones. And the health issue has, anyone who knows India's health infrastructure was crumbling. And at that time, this massive pandemic has come in, and the state and the government first tried to blame it on the minority community rather than taking necessary steps, went on going for the this kind of lockdowns without even only giving 4 hours of notice. And the whole world has seen how the migrant laborers have suffered in India. But that hasn't stopped the India's health crisis, because now India is almost going to be the number two, or at least tomorrow it will reach 3 million cases of COVID cases, and and it is spreading all over. India hasn't even reached the fast peak yet, and then we know the countries are going back and forth. But India is peaking for the last 6 months and continuing to peak. So I think in this situation, uh, these are the areas of serious concern. There is the government in regime in power, which is trying to divide the country, trying to make different communities as the enemies, and that's where the real problem lies. And when it fails, it is creating internally Muslims or minorities, Dalits enemy. It is trying to find the enemies like outside the country, like Pakistan and China. So it's a conflict internally and externally has become quite problematic. And the real problem is the regime, instead of addressing these conflicts, is trying to ferment the conflict more and more, because it thinks that it will be politically beneficial for the regime to get out of the mess, or at least politically benefit the mess they have created, health-wise, economically, and job-wise.
So, as you say, the regime is involved in attempting not to resolve, but to fan the flames of this conflict. There's this health crisis going on in India right now, and there's also this burgeoning, very much flourishing economic crisis at the moment. And historically, we know that economic crisis in particular, as well as all of these other crises, they offer fertile soil for authoritarianism to grow, to flourish, for even for fundamentalism to flourish. And so that, what would you say that that is one of the fundamental issues here? Is the growth of the Hindu nationalist regime of Hindu fundamentalism as over these past 6 years?
Yes, I mean, there is a rising Hindu fundamentalism in the society. Not, I mean, at least it is going on since 1980s, or particularly since late 80s, 90s. But it has come to power. It has got the complete power for the last 6 years under Narendra Modi. And Narendra Modi, prime minister, as a prime minister, doesn't pretend to be a prime minister of a secular country. So the secularism has gone to really, it's only in the constitution, it's only in the name, but there is no such, the principles of secularism are not at all followed in India. I mean, if you can look at it, thus the couple of weeks back, India's prime minister, which is a prime minister of a secular country, going for the groundbreaking ceremony of a temple which was built in the place of a demolished mosque, which was demolished by illegal means. So I think, in a sense, it really doesn't really anymore. The prime minister of India doesn't even pretend to be the prime minister of a secular country. India has become in each and every way a Hindu fundamental country of Hindu fundamentalists, ruled by Hindu fundamentalists. And so when religious fundamentalist groups openly runs a country, you don't expect democracy to run. So the democracy, and particularly when the majoritarian group captures the power on an ethnic manner or ethnic mobilization, of course, democracy is the first one to go. So there is an authoritarian regime, it's a Hindu fundamental regime which is running the country and which doesn't even pretend to be a secular country or doesn't even pretend to be a democratic country.
And you referenced this laying of the foundation stone at the beginning of this month of this Ram Mandir, this temple on the base, on the ruins of this Babri Masjid, this mosque that was destroyed in order to make way for this temple. You referenced how that foundation stone was laid by Modi, the prime minister of the country. So what we're really seeing, an increasing mixture of religion and politics, where it's becoming very difficult to separate one from the other in India at the moment, it seems. Now, India's Hindu nationalist movement, as we've discussed a little bit, has sparked and is fanning the flames of a great deal of violent conflict, political violence in India. But what about outside of India? Is the Hindu nationalist movement isolated to India? What is it doing outside of India, if anything?
I think there is a Hindu nationalist movement, of course, very powerful in India, but you should need to realize the link of Hindu nationalist movement in the rest part of the world. There is a Hindu diaspora or Indian diaspora, what you can see. There are nearly 30 millions all over the world. So there is a large number of diaspora which has spread to different parts of the world. The Hindus living in different parts of the world, particularly in the West, have been mobilized by the Hindu fundamentalist groups in India for a long period of time. It is not new, but I think what has happened, as you probably know, we go back to this Ajodhya issue, when the Advani, the previous leader of BJP, when he mobilized the India against this mosque at the place of Ayodhya. So that is the time the mobilization of Hindu diaspora took place in a much larger way abroad, particularly in the US and the UK. And since then, it has been, and there has been, they have been supporting all sorts of activities of Hindu fundamentalist groups in India. They are also supported Modi when Modi was accused of in 2002 riot, anti-Muslim riots, which killed nearly 2,000 people in Gujarat when he was the chief minister, and several European Union countries, and when United States and Canada had banned him to come to this part of the world. So that is the time when they were really giving him full support of legitimizing him. In a sense. So I think it's a long process which has been going on. But what we see for the last 6 years when Modi came to power, there has been a connection of Indian government together with the Hindu fundamentalist groups, those who are operating abroad. Or those who are there, and I think it's
which are these groups? Which are the major groups that are operating abroad?
Of course, RSS has this own organizations called the RSS calls itself RSS in India, but when abroad it's called HSS. And then overseas friends of BJP. There are a number of organizations which are they don't call themselves, but they are offshoots of various HSS or RSS organizations. They are here. You will see a number of caste-based organizations, number of regional-based organizations, those who are very much active in many parts of US and Canada, and also in UK and other parts of Europe. They are directly connected to RSS, the India's what you call the umbrella group of the mothership of the Hindu fundamentalism, and I think they do support them and also receive supports from them in many ways.
So RSS, for our viewers, it's a paramilitary founded in 1925. It has fascist origins. It has this vision, this fundamentalist vision of turning India into a Hindu Rashtra, a Hindu nation, a theocratic state. And so you're
and if I may add, it was even against the freedom movement. It was against the all sorts of any kind of secular country. It was against the constitution. It was even because it wanted the caste-based, the Manu Smriti to be the constitution. So it was even in the against the flag, Indian flag.
And so you're joining from Sweden, where you're based, and I believe Sweden has a OFBJP or Overseas Friends of the BJP group. As you mentioned, there's many of those in UK, Canada, Germany, and US, of course. And so that's one of the major Hindu fundamentalist or RSS affiliated groups that operate. So you've also mentioned this HSS, Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh. So I want to ask you, Dr. Swain, what benefit does the Hindu nationalist movement derive from its presence abroad, from operating abroad like this through these groups like HSS and OFBJP? And you've already kind of referenced this with mention of how Modi was banned from many of these countries after 2002.
I think by mobilizing those people abroad on the Hindu fundamentalist, as a Hindu fundamentalist group, RSS has been receiving funding. It's a lot of money collected abroad, which has been sent in many various manners that have been, because RSS even doesn't openly say how much money they're getting abroad. So it's a huge source of funding. But I think also at the election time, these people directly not only contribute to the parties or to Hindu fundamentalist candidates, but also go there, even campaign for them. Nowadays, even the campaigning through the telephone calling from, there is lots of telephone calls goes from United States or Canada or to Europe to the their village people at the time of election. Even many of them travel India to campaign for this. But I think it's though, because you know that if you're living abroad, you are so-called NRI, non-resident Indian, particularly living in the US or Europe, your social status is much higher, because you do have a land, you have areas which you give for others to, you are giving to people to cultivate it and other things, and you also, because you are rich, or some people think that you might able to help them out or something. So when you go to the village, you ask for the votes to, and you say that, look, Modi has done so much of good things, or and he's such a huge leader abroad. Then of course people believe it. I mean, so it's a massive help for the campaign, particularly for this party, when they get this kind of diaspora to go there. But I think there are issues when because it also is helping. Particularly these Hindu fundamentalist leaders in India, particularly Modi, to use these groups for his own political image. As it, when he was even in the chief minister, he used this image. But after, when he became the prime minister, when he comes abroad, he organizes this massive event. All his foreign trips are the massive diaspora events to show that to their, it's a Erdogan style politics, to show these leaders in the countries, where the host countries, look, I do have so many supporters. He did that even in Sweden. Sweden didn't have that many, but I think, when in this kind of cutthroat political competition, some votes are really important, and these are the critical votes. So I think that's why he thinks that, or he uses his support base in European countries or in any other country, saying that he can really negotiate with the foreign leaders on that. So he was using that strength. And I think it's extremely important for the rest of the world to be aware that what is happening. But at the same time, I must also add, because of this politics, what has happened, of course, it's a huge gain has come to the Hindu fundamentalist groups, Modi and RSS, but it has become quite problematic for India, because the Indian diaspora has been sometimes used for India's foreign policy before. I mean, like the nuclear issue when the UPA was doing in the US, they used the diaspora. But that time, what has happened before, Indian diaspora was relatively a unit which was irregularly used, but it was not as divided. But what has happened when the Hindu fundamentalists have really become so active in the last 6-7 years, or 7-8 years, that has really made Indian diaspora heavily divided. Like you can see the Kashmiri diaspora, the Sikh diaspora, the Tamil diaspora, the Dalit diaspora, the indigenous people diaspora, or the some of the people those who really don't like this kind of Hindutva diaspora, even they come from the Hindu background. So they have really been also which mobilized against this Hindu diaspora. So Hindu diaspora, when it's identified as for the regime, so it is being opposed by the other diaspora. So for the first time, you realize that when the protest was going on in the different parts of the world, particularly in the capitals of Europe and North America, against the Citizenship Amendment Act before the COVID crisis came in, you will see that everywhere when there was a pro-protest, there was also anti-protest. And the anti-protest was as powerful as pro-protest was. So I think India had never seen that kind of, even, it is, I think what they are doing is that it is, they means I'm talking about the Hindu fundamentalist groups and the Modi are benefiting themselves, but it is really becoming a huge cost for India as a country.
And so as we're seeing a lot of this division grow between these diaspora groups in these countries abroad, and as we are also seeing, as you mentioned, these Hindu fundamentalist or Hindu nationalist groups attempts to not only support politics and not only support the BJP in India from abroad, but also insert their feet in the door and influence politics in the countries where they've taken up residence. I want to ask you a question about that in relation to these rockstar receptions that you mentioned. For instance, last year, most recently in the US, we saw this event, Howdy Modi, in Houston, Texas. And previously, we've seen in California, in New York, we've seen a number of American politicians take part in these events. And most notably, we've seen this congresswoman from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard, take part in a couple of these events. In the first one in New York in 2014, she actually met with Modi. She gave him a deeply personal gift, and then she was personally invited by him to take a unilateral, a solo trip to India, where she went in early 2015, and she toured around for about 3 weeks, and she spoke at a couple of RSS and BJP affiliated events, and just rubbed shoulders with a lot of these Hindu nationalist figures. So I want to ask you about that. Last year, you actually told me that these Hindu nationalist groups were backing Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard because, quote, they understand that the international community is increasingly worried about the sectarian violent politics of the Sangh in India. So how could somebody in America like Tulsi Gabbard make a difference for the Hindu nationalist agenda in India?
I think you see there has been a traditional it has been believed by the rest of the world that India is a secular country, it's a democratic country, India is a peaceful country, Hindu religion is a peaceful religion of some kind of, they connect with the India's freedom struggle and all these things. So that's why they have got into this. But I think what has happened in the gradually when Modi came into power in 2014 in an electoral process, they thought, okay, and he came through a democratic process. Though they knew his history, but they thought that probably he will act as a democratically elected leader, as a secular leader, secular country's leader, and also they thought he was promising all these kind of economic development and all sorts of things. So it's a large market. Economy didn't really work out well, but at the same time, the rest of the world, particularly the Western world, is aware gradually that what is happening in India, because they realized the situations one after another. Particularly, they woken up with the Kashmir. What happened in Kashmir when he really took away the Article 370, put the whole Muslim-dominated province in a lockdown for a year, arrested all sorts of leaders. I mean, it's a huge human rights violation taking place there. And that was really opened the eyes. And also the Citizenship Amendment Act, which really, which doesn't give the citizenship to the Muslim refugees, gives to the others, but not the Muslim refugees. These are the two things basically open the eyes of the world that this guy is virtual. I mean, there are many things. I'm just mentioning these are two very important things. So what has happened before, of course, the liberal press was trying to criticize him. There was some kind of a human rights organization, civil rights organizations were criticizing. But now it is becoming quite more and more criticism. And also the political parties are realizing abroad that this is a party which is not exactly a democratic party they are dealing with in India. So I think that's why you will see there has been a lot of opposition taking place. In many sense, they have been lucky that there are the key countries like United States or in the UK or in Australia or in Japan, these kind of leaders which really are the present leaders or the present top leaders have also right-wing background. So I think that has helped. But internally, they know that these are also democratic countries. These countries' constitution work. There are other institutions which work. So for that, they need some sort of support. So in that, that's why they need a support, or that they can really somehow internally oppose any kind of acts which goes against this kind of organization or this kind of people, those who are operating in India. So I think this is why Tulsi Gabbard because she was liberal, considered in the United States. She was a darling of some of the Democrat, because she comes from the Democratic Party. She was young. She was quite articulate. So I think, and then they found her, as a kind of candidate who can really fulfill the job of or defend them. And she also defended it in many ways. I mean, she has defended Modi in the US Congress committees. You can go back to the history. You see that she has been defending she has been loyal. She has been, no doubt about that, she has been a lawyer. But she felt to really be the presidential candidate, and which I thought probably that would have been a major achievement, or the fantastic achievement of the Hindu fundamentalist groups in India. But she felt that way. But I think if you look at it, I have even said, look, when Kamala Harris and Tulsi Gabbard, they are both competing at the primary level. You look at the Indian media, the Hindu groups, they're also excited about Tulsi Gabbard, but very, very reluctant to accept the fact that Kamala Harris, because in spite of
notably, Kamala Harris is actually of Indian origin.
Absolutely, and she is from Samoa.
Indian origin, no Indian ancestry whatsoever.
That's a Hindu, just Hindu, really, because Kamala Harris, though her mother is a Hindu Brahmin, her mother really took care of her. She grew up with her mother, but that was not the case. They went on Tulsi Gabbard. And then now, when Kamala Harris has been become the vice presidential nominee, you could see that the Indian government refused to even congratulate her. They said that we are not interfering in the internal election. But the same government, or their prime minister, came to this so-called the Howdy Modi rally, where the Trump was there, and he was saying that the Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar, and then organizing.
Basically means once more the Trump regime.
That's virtually campaigning for him, so this is, and then created this big rally for him, when even the India should have been preparing for itself COVID in Ahmedabad. So they have gone all out. So I think what is happening is that really worried of the criticism of the political, those who are with conscience, with kind of liberal values, with secular values, with democratic values abroad, particularly in United States and the other Western countries. So they want their own people to be there. So that's why they were really are quite serious about that, because they know that if they don't have that, and they have been being exposed by the international media and international action groups and activists. But once they started exposed by the democratic institutions in the Western countries, then they will have nowhere to go.
So, and we saw, for instance, with Tulsi Gabbard in 2013, 2014, she was taking actions in Congress in order to tamp down on or derail attempts to criticize Modi, or to reaffirm this ban on his visa, and kind of to whitewash his tarnished reputation abroad. And now we have new developments, as we discussed, this issue of Kashmir, this issue of the Citizenship Amendment Act, and we are seeing a lot of this political conflict over it playing out in America between different divided diaspora groups. And we're also seeing rising criticism of India's actions in Kashmir and with the CAA, with various congressional representatives, with various city councils around the country. So there's definitely some pressure that's being applied to India and its Hindu nationalist agenda with these issues from here in America. But in context of Tulsi Gabbard, for instance, she's not running for re-election to Congress, and she lost the race for president. And pretty soon in January, she'll be out of office entirely. So is that it? Is it over? Is the song, is the RSS, is the BJP done trying to get powerful political personalities in America or abroad on its side?
It's an interesting question. I think what happened, they have been using their own resources for Trump. I mean, they want Trump to be elected because the India has been completely isolated in South Asia, and China and Pakistan is very quite together and becoming really a major issue for Modi to how to really deal with them. So I think he needs the support. So that I think he was really or he still hopes that the Trump will be back. But I think they are also trying to expect that Tulsi Gabbard, if the Democratic administration will come in, Tulsi might get some positions there. But it looks little bit less likely when Kamala Harris has come in. So that so that they are really having afterthought what will happen, and they're really scared of Kamala Harris coming in. Because they really didn't expect her to get that kind of positions in the new administration if that comes in. So I think in that sense, they probably that's why they are looking for other alternatives where they can really pick the other candidates, where they can really have their basis or find a new Tulsi Gabbard in the Democratic Party. And I think this is where they are really looking for opportunities.
Now, I wish we had enough time to really examine this issue of why, in particular, it seems like these Hindu nationalist groups are looking for people within the Democratic Party, because you've actually written about that in the past, and there's some interesting points to why they would choose that in particular. But as we move on, and we don't have a lot of time left, I want to ask you. You recently wrote, and I quote, "After the Tulsi Gabbard project failed, fascist RSS promotes Sri Preston Kulkarni as a candidate for the U.S. Congress." What do you mean by that?
I think you realize that you can very well see that they need some of their own people in the Congress, in the U.S. Congress, particularly in the Foreign Relations Committee, and where they're expecting something going to happen because there is a gradually increasing pressure on them. What is going on, and I think that they have been trying to put somebody like Preston Kulkarni, who is basically comes from the foreign policy background, foreign diplomatic background from US. So if he gets elected, he is more likely to be in the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Congress, and that will help them to somehow to minimize the kind of challenges which will come to RSS and the Hindu fundamentalist groups from the US administration and the US as a total whole, as a country. So I think this is where it's a very smart move for their side, because they expect that if they can really do it, they can bring Sri Preston Kulkarni to the US Congress, then they can somehow able to withstand certain kind of pressure. So, but that's something which they are putting a lot of resources, a lot of energy, and one thing I will quickly say, because you look at the RSS, RSS doesn't operate like any other Indian political party. I find the RSS operates almost like Chinese Communist Party. They have a very long planning. They don't really look for the 3-4 years planning. They have a very long planning. So it's a gradual process. They are trying to enter. There are different candidates at the different time in the different countries where they are promoting and they are supporting. And they expect that in the long time, they will, if not now, they will be coming to their support. So they have many of these people lining up. Some people are backing down because of the various oppositions. People are opening up their eyes. There is all kinds of things. But I think RSS is putting its RSS really has a long-term plan. It's unlike any, that you can say to this kind of political parties in India. But I think RSS is very different in that way.
And we've seen a number of these other congressional representatives like Ro Khanna, like Pramila Jayapal, who've actually, they're of Indian origin, but they've been very vocal in support of human rights in India and in criticism of the Modi regime and Hindu nationalism and its violence. It's a different story, however, with this gentleman who's running for Congress in Texas, Sri Preston Kulkarni, who is of Indian origin, who has a foreign policy background, but who's been very, very silent on the issue of what's going on in India right now. And so just as we wrap up, I want to just touch on his association with the RSS. You mentioned financing, but in particular, there's an issue where he is very closely associated in his campaign for the past 2 or 3 years with this gentleman, Ramesh Butata, who is vice president of the HSS. He's essentially the number 2 man for the RSS in America. And he's been at the center of Kulkarni's campaigns. How should Americans feel about that? And related to that, when, if ever, would it be okay for a politician to associate with the RSS?
I think this goes against the basic ethos, basic value of America as a country, America as an institution, America as a leader of the world. And I think they should realize that they are directly, if with the support to this kind of people, these people represent fascist organizations, which is at present in creating an apartheid system, if not directly going for a program in large scale at present, but they are certainly going to do it, and that those kind if the world and particularly United States should not remain blind to that kind of issues, because the information is available. People have come up, and I think it's not anymore that it's not anything hidden. So I think it's very important for the US, for its own moral value, and also to look at the global peace and stability, to make a strong commitment not to support these kind of organization or these kind of people, those who have anything to do with the Hindu fundamentalists, this kind of fascist outfits in India, because then they will be responsible for the incoming, the violence, the kind of the suppression, the killing of a large number of people, which is very likely take place if we are not going to, the world is not going to stop them right now.
And my last question for you, Dr. Swain, relates to the issue of how this top figure in the HSS, Ramesh Butata, who's associated with Sri Preston Kulkarni. Kulkarni is a Hindu, Butata is a Hindu. The RSS presents itself as a Hindu organization. Is it anti-Hindu is it anti-Hindu to criticize the RSS, or to criticize association with the RSS's international groups such as the HSS?
I think I'm a Hindu. I'm a practicing Hindu. It doesn't. The India has 80% of population Hindu. BJP doesn't get the more than support of 30 to 35%. Do you think all the rest of the people are anti-Hindu? Why they will be? I mean, Hinduism and this kind of Hindu fascist organizations have nothing in common. The Hinduism which we have learned are part of, we are born into a religion, and the kind of things for which we still continue in that religion, because that it's at least in that religion. There are also issues. I totally understand that, I'm not going to any way justify the caste system and other issues. But at the same time, I would say that there are ways that we do think that there are possibilities of improvement. There is a possibility of cooperation. There is a possibility of living together. It's a religion which can really able to, in some way, the living in harmony and cooperation if they really want to. But I think this is where the Hindu fundamentalist or Hindu fascist organizations, particularly what we call the Hindutva, is a political project, is a criminal project. It is trying to use the Hinduism not for Hinduism, not for Hindus, but to target the others. And I think that's where the problem lies. I consider if you are a Hindu, you can never support a Hindutva.
Well, thank you, Dr. Swain. I appreciate your time, your insight, your thoughts, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
It's my pleasure. And always pleasure to speaking to you. Thank you.